author CJ Peterson, and we're here with my partner, author Michael Scott Clifton. We'll be talking to author Macy Lewis in just a few minutes, but before we do, Mike, how was your week?
Week has been a busy one and hot one. I think we talked about that last week. Believe it or
Yes.
not, it's even hotter this week than it was last week. But um, this weekend we'll be at the Shreveport GeekCon, and that is a 3-day con. Starts Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it's at the Shreveport Civic Center. And I'll be there with a bunch of other people, and so we're looking forward to that. And um, also, we were talking earlier before the podcast started. We both have books coming out, and my latest book is entitled Pringle Prawn, and I am almost finished with it. Almost finished with the manuscript, the book cover, and very very close to getting it published as an ebook and a paperback. And I've been working on it for a year, so it takes me about a year to write a book, and I'm very excited about that. And on a more serious note, tonight at 6 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
Carter Novels will be hosting a tribute to the late Caleb Pirtle. I plan to be part of that. That'll be at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. Um, Let me make sure that
That's correct.
yes,
I was going to say something about that. It's on
and
the Author Life
yeah,
podcast. It's on YouTube
me
as well
too.
as Facebook, and that's with Rob and Joan Carter. And we'll be talking about Caleb Pirtle III and how his loss has hit the author community. So our thoughts and prayers are with Linda.
Most of us, anyone that's ever been around Caleb and in around where we live, virtually everyone has come in contact with him.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a great author, forgotten more about writing than most people profess to know, but he was an even better person.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had one word to describe him, it would be he was an encourager. And and he always encouraged authors, whether they be newbies, which I was when I started out, or and ran into Caleb, and he encouraged me quite a bit, and even after that. So there's I don't know. Sometimes when you see people, great people, men and women that pass away, you wonder what are we going to do now because there just doesn't seem to be the same caliber coming up the pike, so to speak, to replace them. So anyway, that's at 6 o'clock tonight.
Mm-hmm. I look at it as more as what they gave to this world. We can take the mantle up
True.
and
Yes. Yes.
carry
Yes.
their legacy on
Mhm.
to others that are within
Right.
the same realm that we're in.
Yeah. Their their legacy lasts much long past their
Hmm.
mortal life, and that's a good point, CJ.
And Caleb loved to share other people's works, and
Right.
so I'm all for that. So that's one thing we enjoyed and shared a passion for is sharing
Mhm.
the work of other authors.
Right.
And yeah, he was great at that, and he was a great encourager. So again, our thoughts and prayers are with Linda. I
Yes.
will be watching tonight, um, and that's at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time and or Central Daylight Time. I think we're on now. But make sure to catch that tonight on Facebook and on YouTube, and don't miss that one. For me, I'm currently on vacation in Galveston, so we're having fun down south for a little bit. Kind of, it's about 10 degrees cooler than we're 10 to 20 degrees cooler than back home, which is hanging between 105 and 110. So not my pace right now. But yes, I have a book coming out on September 5th. It's going to be Tested by Fire, and it's where a fire marshal falls in love with an arsonist before he realizes that she's the arsonist. So that will be on September 5th at 6 o'clock. I will have multiple other authors, and if you've ever watched Texas Sisters Press book launch, everybody brings something to give away. So make sure to watch, and you can win prizes. Don't want to miss that. But today we're going to be talking to Macy Lewis. Before we do so, Casey says, "Hey, y'all." Um, so we'll be talking about Macy Lewis, and her genre is romantic suspense. Welcome, Macy.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
I know we had a
Yeah.
little bit of technical difficulty last time, so we're glad we're getting you on today.
Yes,
Um,
we had some technical difficulties today too.
we did, but we got it sorted. One thing I learned the last time in talking to you, though, you said you had a sighted person help you.
Mhm.
You're actually a blind author.
Yes, ma'am.
How does that work, curiosity wise?
It takes a lot of extra time, but I'm willing to do it. A lot of audio. So I use a screen reader on my laptop, and then I have an iPhone, and that has, it's called VoiceOver. That's a screen reader on there, and so I can research and type, and sometimes I'll do voice memos if I get an idea, or the dictation to text, and I'll just transfer ideas onto my laptop. That's mainly how I do it because it's faster.
My daughter Casey is also legally blind, and she was wondering if you use JAWS.
I do.
Gotcha. So you're
So
right.
what is JAWS? I'm curious.
Oh,
What is
So JAWS is a screen reader, and it stands for Job Access with Speech, and it enables the user to access pretty much everything on the desktop like you would, except we don't use a mouse. We use arrow keys and tab keys, all the computer keyboard keys, and it sounds like a robot. So we get a little artificial intelligence going on, but it can't, like really take control over your computer or anything as of now. But it can, it allows you to use Microsoft Suite, iTunes, Internet, basically anything you could possibly want, except if, on the Internet, if websites aren't accessible, that causes a problem. But pretty much you can access anything you need to.
Casey says about 1,000,000 commitments later. So your genre is romantic suspense. What made you choose that one?
I actually chose this one because of my mentor who was blind. She wrote romantic suspense. I say we, I still think of her as being here. She passed away last year, but she wrote clean, thank you. She wrote clean romantic suspense. And so I read her books and I was like, wow, she's an amazing writer. I want to do that. And so she mentored me on my first book, which was Fevered Hearts. And she took me through the whole writing process and showed me how to, write like a sighted person would, I suppose you could say. It's kind of tricky to learn how to do that, but it worked. And now I've got 4 novels out.
Nice.
And a novella I just released a few weeks ago with J. Creighton Smith. So it's really fun.
So do you ever co-write with somebody, or do you find it easier just to write by yourself?
I think both. So like I said, I wrote a novella with J. Creighton Smith. It's called The Hindsight of Faith, and we just discovered through interacting that our writing styles were so similar. And he had the idea for our novella. He had a blind character, and he had emailed me and said, "Can you give me some pointers of how she would act in her environment and what that would look like?" And I said, "Sure." And then I said, "Well, what does this character look like?" And he goes, "I don't know." So I said, "Well, can I help you plan what she might look like?" And things just kind of snowballed from there, and we ended up going back and forth and collaborating on this novella. And I think it turned out really well. I also have a novel that I wrote with another author named Jim King, and we released it in March of this year. It's called Weathering the Storm, and it is my longest novel up to date right now, and it's about another blind girl. It was actually the first blind character that I wrote about, and Jim and I, our collaborative effort is really simple. He kind of tells me, okay, this is what I think, the theme of the book should be, and then I think the outline should look like this. And we just kind of bounce ideas back and forth until we're both satisfied. And then he lets me run with it. And then he reads over everything and says, okay, I think we need to change this here. And so it's really, both of these co-authors are very easy to work with. And I think that's really helpful.
I like that because being blind, you do a lot of touch.
Yes.
So, and you touch the other senses. So a lot of things, when we talk about showing and not telling, you're probably great at because you can give it from that perspective. My question is, how do you do how difficult is it to actually do the sighted portion of it?
It can be pretty tricky. So I have a young adult series that is the first book is with my editor right now, and I remember when she was going through it a little bit, but I had to do a pretty major rewrite of the book, and so one of the comments she had was, I had a couple of characters looking at each other through sunglasses, and I just automatically assumed, oh, they're like regular glasses, like you can see out of the sunglasses, so maybe you could see each other's eyes. And she goes, you actually can't. So little things like that where I'll think, oh, can you actually see this, or does this look, a certain way? Sometimes that'll get a lot of chuckles from editors or decided people who beta read for me, and they're like, this actually can't happen, but nice try.
I like that you have a really good sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So Macy, how many books do you have out?
I have 8.
And
can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. So the trilogy I have right now is called the Hidden Hearts series, and those are parallel novels. The first one is Fevered Hearts. That's about a doctor who goes to Liberia to help with the Ebola epidemic. The book 2 in that series is called Imprisoned Hearts, and that's about a girl in high school who is living in a pretty bad situation with her mother and stepfather, and she ends up running away to be with, someone tries to help her, and then she ends up in an even worse situation, and she has to get out of it. And then the third book in that series is called Shattered Hearts, and that deals with the girl in the second book. Her father, he's had a pretty rough life, and it's his story, but when he finds love, he ends up getting diagnosed with an illness, and it's not good. It's a terminal illness. So, but then the other novel I have is called Weathering the Storm, and that's the blind character, and that deals with the weather in the world has gone completely chaotic, and there's just crazy stuff happening all over the place, and she thinks someone is controlling the weather, and everybody thinks she's crazy. But she is like, I'm going to figure out what's going on. And so she goes on an adventure with her counterpart, and it's action and romantic. And then this novella with J. Crain Smith, it's called The Hind Side of Faith, and that is about a girl who is named Faith, and she's living on the streets because she has had an addiction to oxycodone, and it's basically just completely ruined her life. And she ends up in this building where she kind of has all these bizarre, strange visions happening to her, and she realizes, oh, like, everybody still loves me, God loves me, and I can get through this. And then I have children's books on the flip side of all these romantic suspense books that I write. I have some children's books. If you want me to talk about those, I will. But
Well, I have a question. So
yeah.
what differs standard romance to romantic suspense?
The way that I see it is romantic suspense just has more action involved in it. It's not necessarily just all about lovey-dovey. It's lovey-dovey with, we gotta have some action going on, where there's killings and crazy explosions and car chases and that type of thing.
Books.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I laugh because mine is the one coming out in September is actually romantic suspense. So I kind of had an idea that's where you were heading. I just wanted to clarify it for everybody.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to remember that it's not just lovey-dovey; it's active lovey-dovey. You could take that the wrong way, but I was just
killings and stuff.
Just remember violence with lovey-dovey. Maybe that's the way to say it.
I'm just a literary assassin, so I kind of chuckled at the killings.
There you go.
Lots of killings. It's great. And a little bit of romance. So
it's true. You got to have the romance to balance it out.
Yeah,
gotta have a body count too, though, right?
Well, the ones that counted came through, so it's okay.
That's true. Yeah, it's funny. Well, how long have you been writing, Macy? And how did you get your? Well, you kind of we might have talked about that before the show. No, you talked about how long have you been writing?
Well, I've been writing, not the books, but I've been writing since I was oh so young in school. I always gravitated toward the creative writing projects that we would get. So it was like write a poem or write a short story, and I was all over that. And then it was after college. I have a degree in history, and I think that helps with the writing of all the books because I like to research different topics and things that I'm working on. And I just had this idea, hey, if I could write a book about a topic I could research, that would be pretty cool. And meanwhile, while I was in, college and high school, I would just get these random ideas for stories and I would write them down in a file on my computer and just leave them there. And nothing ever really happened. But in college, I picked out one of those ideas, which was the service trip with the doctor, and tried to make it work, and it just wasn't. And so I picked it up again when the Ebola epidemic happened in 2014, and I just thought, maybe I could do something with this. And so I did the research, and it took, uh, well, 2 years to write the original manuscript, which was oh so embarrassing. I'm sure you guys know that, what that's like. And then I met my mentor in 2015, I think it was, and asked her to help me when my manuscript was finished, and she said yes. And then she goes, actually, let's write a whole new story. And I'm going, okay, I spent 2 years and you want me to scrap everything except for like 2 or 3 pages? Yep. Okay. What do I do now? And she goes, well, I'll help you. And so that's, I think it took 6 months to actually get it all written. So Fevered Hearts was published in 2018. So since 2018, I suppose you could say I've really been working on it.
Seriously, since 2018. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking 5 years?
5 years? Yeah.
Yeah. Going on 5 years. So you mentioned beta groups, beta readers, and you also mentioned editors. So what is your process for when you write your manuscript for having it vetted or run by folks? Do you have close friends? Do you have people you trust? How does that work with your writing?
Yeah, so I have really close friends. Depending on, I've just discovered over the years who's most reliable for what projects. So I've got, the friends with the kids. They read the children's books and they tell me, okay, this is what I like. This was kind of confusing. Let's fix this up. Some of them are teachers, school teachers themselves, and so they're really good at it too. For my novels, and everything. I have one particular person who's really good. She's my aunt, and she's a very, very honest beta reader, and she does not sugarcoat anything, and I love that because she'll be like, why are these characters doing this, or why is this important, and what's the deal with this? I don't understand it. And I'm like, thank you. That's what I need.
You need those. Yeah, definitely. I always tell people, I tell my editor all the time, I'm like, I'd rather you were mean than a reviewer be mean.
It's so true.
Yeah, I'm like, just be as mean as you want to.
With this rewrite that I'm doing that I did with the young adult book that I'm working on, it's called The Island of Camry. And she basically said, look, we've gone through the first 7.5 chapters. You need to rewrite this whole thing from chapter 8 onto the end because it's not working. And I was just like, what? Really? Ouch. And then I was going, okay, wait a minute. This is why I pay her to do her job. She's saving me from, looking like a total nightmare. And so it took some definite collaboration between me and some friends because, I've had this idea in my head for 4 years or something. And I couldn't get past it. And so I had to collaborate with a few friends and get their input and ideas. And we came up with something awesome. And now I'm like, what was I thinking? I'm so glad she stopped me from putting out the disaster of a manuscript.
Yeah, I found my husband. He's kind of a little bit of that for me too. And my editor, she's like that too for me. But it's like sometimes we're reading, it goes, you have a slow point here. And I'm ADD and OCD, so when I hit that point, I'm like, oh no, that needs to go away, or I need to put something else in here. So, yeah, I do not like being bored in my own books.
I think we all have our disaster stories on our manuscripts, some worse than others, but yeah, I don't think anybody starts out hitting the ground running. It's a learning
No.
process from
Yeah, we
this
just
start.
was that a couple weeks ago we talked about to write or not to rewrite. That is the question.
Right. Right.
And I had taken my first manuscript, and it took me, like we talked before, I wrote the Sands of Time trilogy in like a month and a half, I think. And to rewrite my very first book, it took me 6 to 8 months. And so it's like being locked in for a pantser is painful. Um, but it makes it so much better because I had published that in 2012 and I republished it in like 20, I want to say 18. So it's like you've grown so much that you just kind of look at that first book or whatever the disaster book is, and it's like, okay, yeah, no, let's go ahead and just rewrite it, and it comes out so much better, and you're not really embarrassed anymore to talk about it. Very much
Uh,
helpful.
well, you chose, to have taken a manuscript, Macy, that you worked on for 2 years
Hmm.
and just and put it aside, when you were working with your mentor. That shows quite a bit of courage and perseverance to be able to do that. I don't know that I would have been able to do that. Um,
It was hard. It was really hard. It wasn't easy. There were days where she was the type of person who could encourage you but also push you, and that's what I needed. And she'd be like, no, no, you're not getting this, let's work on this again. And I would be banging my head against the wall figuratively, and I'd be going, what am I'm trying my hardest. And she'd be going, gosh, you must be really angry today. I could totally tell. I'm going, what are you talking about? I'm not angry. But I think she did the best thing she could, which she wasn't spoon feeding me how to do everything. She was telling me, this is what I need from you, and I'm not getting it. And, there were the good days, there were the really bad days, but even on the really bad days when I would just be like, I'm not getting this, she'd always be like, you have the potential. I see it in you, and I want you to keep working at it. And I think it was on Weathering the Storm. It was kind of our COVID project that we were writing during lockdown, and that's when I felt like everything clicked. That she had been teaching me for years. This is how you do this, and something just in my head just went, I
mm,
got it, and I was like, oh, yay! For 3-4 years, finally, it's making sense. So that was pretty nice.
So did you take the premise of the book that you have been writing for 2 years and just readjusted it and rewrote it, or did you just completely scrap the entire book?
We scrapped the entire thing because it was this really sappy, romantic, not a lot of violence going on. This,
You're my type
and
of reader. I
so
love
we rewrote it and focused mainly on this service trip because I'd only put it in like 2 or 3 pages worth. And that's where she was like, well, if you like the service trip so much, let's write a new book. And I was going, you're out of your mind. But okay. And it has lots of lovey-dovey and violence. So it's perfect.
She says, okay, for those that are listening, she says lovey-dovey, and then she says violence, and she grins.
I'm not normal.
You're my kind of person, though. You're my people. I love it. It's great.
yeah.
So, quick question of if you had like one gold nugget to give to somebody who wants to write romantic suspense, which is kind of like a really good piece of advice, what would you tell them?
Oh. Just start writing and then find a group of people, like a critique group or something, and then take what they say with a grain of salt because ultimately it's your story. So just start writing. That's my nugget of advice. It's probably not very good, but it
No, it's
definitely will
actually,
get the juices flowing, I guess.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually not bad.
Yeah. Well, and if you've got like, if you're writing romance, you're wanting to write suspense, make sure there's a lot of killing and you're good.
Remember, lovey-dovey and violence.
Right, lovey dovey and violence.
CJ's going to be laughing all day. Lovey-dovey and violence.
Casey says lovey-dovey and
Uh,
violence
So when
genre.
you're
There
there,
you
you
go.
go. That's your 30-second
There's
elevator
a new
pitch. What's the
genre.
book's about? It's about lovey dovey and violence. Oh, really? Yeah,
That's a thing. I
We
love
should
it.
make it a thing now.
that's
I think
right.
so.
That's
Maybe instead of romance suspense, we'll put lovey-dovey violence genre, and we'll see what
Yeah.
happens. takes
Well,
off.
That's not a bad
that's a good
idea.
tagline, Macy, just on your books. A lovey-dovey violence novel.
I like it. I'll be the bestseller in that category.
That's
I'll
right.
be the only one.
Amazon will create a whole new category just for that. So
It's true.
I am for it. I am totally for it. I love that. I said, you're my kind of person. I love it. So, if someone's kind of trying to figure out specifically writing like romance suspense versus romance something else, what would kind of propel them to kind of steer more for the romantic suspense version? Besides the
Um. There goes my idea. I was going to say the more violence, but I think I mean, this is just my personal preference. I've always been, I've always liked, the James Bond series and the because it was lovey-dovey and violent, and that's just my personality. I the slow books where there's a lot of dancing and romantic. That's just not who I am. So I guess maybe it comes down to personality. I don't know, but if they want to, I think they're more gripping and they draw you in and they captivate you,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, I've got to see what happens next with the violence. And then in that, when you're reading about that, then you see the lovey-dovey coming out.
exactly.
I don't know.
That was actually Trevor that said lovey-dovey violence new genre. That's my husband.
Well, I know that romance readers are are a very dedicated group, and um, it's I think last I checked of all fiction sales, it makes up 50% of all fiction sales, and so there's a lot of readers out there that do like romance. One thing that I've been told down through the years, CJ, you've heard the same thing, is that when it's just general romance, that A, you have to have sex by the third chapter, and B, you must always have a happy ending. So, and
So for
I
romantic
think I've
Debbie
ruined
violence
that.
doesn't seem to fit that category. Just
chapter 3, and then a happy ending at the end.
Yeah, I totally ruined that with the Shattered Hearts. People are gonna hate me now. They're gonna be like, ugh.
but I like that. I mean, maybe
Sure.
there'd be 60 or 70% of all fiction sales that kind of branched out a little bit and sort of threw a few curveballs in there instead of, being generically just like all the other books. I mean, I really do like that, Macy. I really do. That's unique.
I have a hard time writing books that somebody doesn't at least die somewhere. But I mean, it's a glorious death. It's a death that needs to be in there. It's just I have
Yeah.
a hard time doing it without it.
It's hard. I will say this: my books do not actually have sex in them. They allude to it,
Yeah.
but so because I wanted it to be like the reader can make it what they want.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get you there, but I won't talk about it.
No, I like that.
That's
Good job.
good. Good. That's a
So
good
if
way to
folks want to learn more about Macy Lewis, you can head on over to her website, which is, I'm waiting for it to go across the screen, www.macylewisbooks.com. That's www.macylewisbooks.com. Thank you, Macy, for joining us today. I love how your books sound. I cannot wait to go get some for myself. So next week we're going to be talking about writing a good villain, working with the dark side, my kind of thing. Being able to write a villain enough that a reader can kind of understand the villain and can kind of empathize with the villain, but not necessarily like the villain. If you can do that, then you've written a good book. So we'll check that out next week. In the meantime, like I said, Macy, thank you so much for joining us. You were a great guest.
Thanks
Cannot
for
wait
having me.
books. We'll see you guys next week, same time, same box you found us at 1 o'clock Wednesday. We'll see you then. Bye.